The world of Varkas was dark and broken. Its skies were filled with storms that never ended. Lightning struck across the black clouds, and thunder rolled through valleys of bone and ash. Mountains bled fire from deep cracks that reached the planet's core. It was a world ruled by fear, and every creature that survived there was shaped by that fear. In the heart of the ruined world stood a giant fortress built from the bones of ancient beasts. The fortress glowed with red light that came from molten rivers flowing beneath it. This was the Hall of Nightmares, where the most terrifying beings in the galaxy gathered. They had been called together by Kor, the warlord of Scales, a creature whose strength was said to rival the storms themselves. His body was covered in black armor-like skin, his eyes bright like burning metal. Kor stood at the head of the hall, watching as the nightmare creatures arrived one by one. The first to enter was Thren, the Fire Lord, a creature made of molten rock. His steps left trails of flame behind him. Next came Veshra, the Queen of Shadows, her form shifting like smoke in the air. Behind her slithered the sky leeches, massive winged creatures with hollow eyes that could drain energy from stars. The hall filled with their growls, hisses, and roars. Kor raised his claw to silence them. His voice echoed through the chamber, deep and powerful. "The reason I have called this council," he began, "is because of a new threat that spreads through the stars. A species not of our kind. They call themselves humans." The creatures murmured in confusion. None had heard this name before. Some laughed, others growled. Thren spoke first, his voice like cracking fire. Humans. What power could such a weak name hold? Veshra's voice came from every shadow. "Our scouts say they are small, fragile. Their bodies would not last a moment on Varkas." Kor nodded. "Yes, small and fragile, yet they do not flee. They do not surrender. They build colonies on dead worlds. They fight monsters larger than themselves. And they win." The hall grew silent. The creatures of nightmare, born from fear itself, felt something they rarely felt. Kor turned to the glowing map that hovered above the table made of stone. It showed stars burning across the galaxy. One corner glowed blue, marking the human expansion. "They have spread faster than any species we have known. They build machines that defy gravity and weapons that cut through metal. But it is not their strength that concerns me. It is their spirit." Thren laughed, a sound like an exploding mountain. "Spirit? What can spirit do against us?" Kor looked at him, eyes glowing brighter. "That is what I want to understand." For a long time, Kor had watched the stars. He had seen countless species rise and fall. Some fought the nightmares with weapons, others with magic or light, but all broke in the end. Fear consumed them, yet humans did not break. When they were afraid, they grew stronger. When they were cornered, they fought harder. When they were beaten, they rose again. Kor did not understand it. He wanted to know what made them different. As the council continued, stories began to spread among the creatures. Some said humans could walk through fire without screaming. Others claimed humans smiled, even when facing death. Some said humans made art, songs, and laughter in the middle of war. Veshra whispered from the shadows, "Perhaps they have no fear." Kor shook his head. "Every creature has fear, but humans control theirs. That is what makes them dangerous." Outside the fortress, the storm roared louder. A scout rushed in, his body half burned by plasma fire. He bowed before Kor. "My lord, the humans have entered our sector. A fleet of small ships approaches. They do not answer our warnings." The hall filled with growls and angry voices. Thren rose, flames bursting from his body. "Then we will crush them, burn their ships, and turn their bones into ash." Kor raised his hand again. "No. I want to see them. Bring one alive." The creatures hesitated. None understood why Kor would want to keep a human alive. To them, humans were just another prey species that would vanish under nightmare claws. But Kor's orders were final. The creatures obeyed. Days passed as storms raged across Varkas. Above the clouds, human ships entered orbit. They were smaller than the monstrous vessels of the Nightmare Fleet, but they moved with precision and purpose. One ship broke formation and began to descend toward the surface. It burned through the clouds, its metal hull glowing red from the heat. The nightmares watched from the fortress towers. The Fire Lord laughed. One ship? Do they send a single warrior to face us? Kor said nothing. His sharp eyes followed the falling ship. It landed in the black desert outside the fortress. Dust rose like smoke around it. The ship's door opened slowly. From inside, a single figure stepped out. She was human, a woman in a gray suit, her face covered by a clear helmet. Her movements were calm and steady. She did not carry a weapon, only a small flag that bore the symbol of her people. The nightmare creatures stared. This tiny being stood before them without fear. Veshra whispered, "She comes alone." Foolish creature, Kor stepped forward. No, brave creature. The human walked until she stood before the gates of the fortress. Her voice, carried through her helmet, reached the creatures gathered above. "My name is Mira of Earth. I come to speak for my people. We seek peace, not war." Her words echoed across the valley. The monsters laughed from the walls. Peace was a word that had no meaning on Varkas. Thren shouted, "Peace. You come to beg for mercy." Mira looked up, meeting his burning eyes. "No, I come to understand what you fear." Silence followed. Even the wind seemed to stop. The Nightmare Council looked at one another. No one had ever spoken to them like that. No one had ever asked what they feared. Kor descended from the fortress and stood before her. He was twice her height, his scales black as space. "You stand in the land of nightmares, human. You should be on your knees." Myra's voice did not shake. "I kneel to no one. Not even fear." Kor studied her face. Behind the clear helmet, he could see her eyes. They were calm, steady, alive with quiet fire. He turned to his warriors. "Do not harm her. She will stay here. I will speak with her myself." The Fire Lord roared in anger. "You show mercy to prey?" Kor replied, "No. I show respect to courage." Mira was taken into the fortress. She walked through halls lined with skulls and glowing runes. The air was hot and thick with smoke. Creatures of nightmare followed her every step, whispering and hissing. Yet she did not flinch. When she entered the main chamber, Kor spoke again. "You say you come for peace, but your people spread across the stars. You take worlds. You build weapons. Why should we trust your words?" Mira looked around at the walls of fire and bone. "Because we have seen fear too. We were weak once. We faced monsters and storms. But we learned that fear can guide us. It can make us strong if we do not let it rule us." Kor watched her carefully. "And what do you seek from us?" "Understanding," she said. "If we are to live in the same stars, we must understand one another. If you fight us, we will fight back. But if you talk, we will listen." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The monsters who had ruled through terror began to feel something unfamiliar. Dash Respect, Korr, stood silent for a long time. Then he said, "You may stay on Varkas until the next storm passes. Then I will decide your fate." Mira nodded. "Thank you, Warlord." When she was led away, the creatures began to argue. Some demanded her death. Others wanted to test her courage. But Kor remained quiet. He looked up at the storm outside and thought of what she had said. Humans were small, fragile, and yet they stood before monsters without fear. That night, Kor walked alone to the edge of the fortress. The wind howled, and lightning flashed across the sky. Far below, he could see the small human ship still glowing in the dark. He remembered her words, "I kneel to no one, not even fear." He felt something strange in his chest, something that had not stirred for ages. It was not anger. It was not hatred. It was curiosity. For the first time, the Warlord of Nightmares wondered if the humans were not invaders. But something else dashed teachers. As the storm raged on, Kor made a silent promise. He would test this human, not with fire or strength, but with fear itself. He would learn if the stories were true, and deep inside, though he would never admit it, he hoped she would not fail. The storm passed over Varkas. as if the world itself was holding its breath. For the first time in many cycles, the lightning faded and the sky cleared to reveal a pale sun. Its weak light touched the fortress of bones and flame, turning the walls into rivers of dull gold. The creatures of Nightmare retreated into the halls. Uneasy in the light they had long forgotten. Inside, the human named Mira was given a chamber built from dark stone. It was cold and filled with shadows that moved on their own. The air was thick with smoke that burned her throat, yet she did not complain. She placed her small bag on the floor, sat on the hard surface, and took out a small metal box. Inside was a photograph of her home world Earth. It showed blue oceans and green fields. She looked at it quietly. Korr entered without warning. His heavy steps made the floor tremble. He looked around the small chamber, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You rest in a place where no human has stood before," he said. Mira turned to him. "I am not afraid." Korr studied her calm face. "Your kind spreads quickly. You take worlds that once belonged to others. Why risk coming here? You knew you would find no welcome." She looked up at him and said, "Because peace is not built by comfort. It is built by courage. We came to show you that we can talk instead of fight." Her words made Korr pause. For all his years leading armies, no one had spoken to him like this. Most bowed, others begged. But this small creature looked at him as if they were equals. He stepped closer. "You are brave, human. But bravery alone cannot change the nature of monsters." Mira replied softly. "Then maybe you are not monsters. Maybe you just forgot what it feels like to be more." Her words stayed in Korr's mind long after he left her chamber. The next day, the Council of Nightmares gathered again. The Fire Lord Thren slammed his molten fists against the stone table. "Why do we keep the human alive? Let me end her and send her ashes back to her people." Vishra, the Shadow Queen, moved through the dark air like mist. "No, let us test her. If she is what Korr says she is, then she will not break." Korr raised his claw for silence. "She will face the trial of fear. If she survives, she will be free to speak for her people. If she fails, her bones will rest among ours." The decision was made. None protested. The trial of fear was ancient. It had been used for ages to test strength and spirit. Those who entered rarely came out alive. When Korr told Mira about it, she only nodded. "If it will prove that we mean no harm, I accept," Korr frowned. "You understand what this trial means? It will show you the darkest part of your mind. It will twist what you fear most into something real." "I know," she said, "but fear is not my enemy. It reminds me that I am alive." That answer surprised him again. She was not fearless. She simply understood fear better than most beings he had met when the day of the trial came. The entire fortress gathered to watch. The arena was carved deep into the ground, its walls made of black crystal that reflected light in strange ways. A thick mist covered the floor. Flames from the Fire Lord's body lit the edges. The air was heavy with tension. Mira stepped into the arena wearing her simple gray suit. She carried no weapon. The monsters surrounded the pit, watching from above. Korr stood at the edge, his eyes following her every move. Veshra's voice echoed through the air. "Let the trial begin." The mist grew thicker, swallowing the arena in white smoke. The shadows began to move. Mira stood still, her breath calm. Then she heard a faint whisper. It was her own voice calling from the mist. "You should not be here," the whisper said. Mira turned slowly. The shape of herself stepped out of the fog, eyes filled with fear. "You will die here," it said. "You cannot fight them. You are only human." Mira's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "I am human, and that is enough." The shadow image screamed and broke apart into dust. The mist swirled and new shapes formed. She saw the faces of people she had lost, her family, her crew, the ones who never returned from missions. Their voices called to her, begging her to give up. Pain filled her heart. But she remembered what her father once told her before she left Earth. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing when fear tells you to run. She closed her eyes and whispered, I will not run. The storm inside the arena changed. The mist pulled back, revealing a massive beast formed from the combined fears of the creatures watching above. It had wings of shadow, claws of fire, and a face that shifted between 1,000 forms. It was the embodiment of nightmare itself. The Fire Lord smiled. Now she will see what fear truly means. The beast roared, shaking the walls. Mira's body shook from the force of it, but she did not fall. The monster charged at her, its eyes glowing red. She rolled aside, feeling the heat of its claws cut through the air. She picked up a broken shard of crystal from the ground, its edge sharp enough to draw blood. The nightmare beast lunged again. Mira ran forward instead of backward. She swung the shard with all her strength, striking its burning chest. The shard broke, but the creature howled. Kor leaned forward. Impossible. The beast tried to rise again, but Mira stepped closer, looking straight into its changing eyes. "You are not real," she said. "You are only what we let you be." The monster froze. Its body began to crumble into smoke and vanish. The mist cleared, and the arena fell silent. Mira stood alone in the center, her face covered in sweat but her eyes steady. She breathed slowly, her heart pounding, but she did not collapse. The Nightmare Council was silent. Even Thren said nothing. Kor jumped into the arena and stood before her. "You faced fear itself and did not fall. No being has ever done that without using power or magic." "How?" Mira looked up at him. "Because I did not fight it. I accepted it. Fear loses power when you understand it." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the Fire Lord laughed softly, not in mockery, but in disbelief. "Strange creature. You break the rules of fear." The Shadow Queen bowed her head slightly. "She is not like others. Perhaps the humans are more than we thought." Kor looked at Mira with a new light in his eyes. It was respect, but also confusion. "Your trial is complete. You have earned your place among us, at least for now." Mira nodded, her breathing still heavy. "Thank you." That night, the fortress was quiet. The creatures whispered about the human who faced the trial of fear and survived. Some were afraid of her now, not because of her strength, but because of what she showed them. If fear could be beaten by acceptance, then the foundation of their world began to shake. Kor stood on the high wall, watching the stars. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Mira joined him, looking at the same stars that glowed faintly through the haze. "You changed something today?" he said. "I did not change anything," she answered. "You all just saw what was always there." He turned to her. "You are strange, Myra of Earth. I have ruled a world built on fear for centuries. You stand here and make it seem so simple." "It's not simple," she said. "We humans feel fear all the time. We just choose to walk through it. That is what keeps us alive." Kor looked at her for a long time. He remembered the stories of her kind. The tales of humans who sailed through space, despite knowing they could die at any moment. He realized now those stories were true. Humans were not fearless. They were something greater. As the wind howled again across the plains of Arcus, Kor spoke quietly. "If what you say is true, then perhaps there is hope even for us." Mira smiled faintly. "There is always hope. You just have to believe it exists." For the first time in many cycles, Kor felt a warmth that did not come from fire. It was not fear, not anger, not hatred. It was something he could not name. Deep within the fortress, the other creatures whispered and planned. Some feared that Mira's courage would spread, that it would break the chains of terror that held them together. Others wanted to learn from her. A few began to wonder if perhaps they too could face the fear that ruled their hearts, but there were still those who wanted her gone. The Fire Lord's eyes burned with envy. He did not like how Kor looked at the human with respect. He saw danger in her presence, danger that could change the order of their world. As the night grew darker, a new storm began to form far across the horizon. Kor did not know that it was not made of wind or lightning. It was made of jealousy and fear of change. Mira looked up at the stars again, unaware of what awaited her. For now, she had survived the trial. But the true test had only just begun. The sun rose over the black deserts of Varkas, painting the world with pale gold light. The nightmare creatures moved cautiously outside the fortress, their shadows stretching long and thin over the cracked ground. For many of them, the trial of fear had been only the first challenge. They had watched Myra closely, realizing that the human had something they did not understand, a spirit that refused to bend. Myra spent the morning walking through the halls of the fortress. The walls were carved with symbols of old wars and battles that had left entire worlds in ruin. The creatures watched her from the shadows, curious and cautious. She saw the Fire Lord Thryn pacing by a river of molten rock, flames dancing from his arms as he muttered in his deep voice. She approached slowly. "Why do you burn so even when there is no enemy?" she asked. Thryn looked at her, surprised that she dared speak to him. "I am the Fire Lord. Fire is my nature. Fire is my strength."
Samurai nodded.
Fire is not just strength. It can destroy, yes, but it can also light a path. You can choose what it does. For a moment, Thryn froze. No human had ever spoken like this. Most ran from his heat. Some screamed, and some died trying to fight him. But Mira looked at him as if he were simply another being who could make a choice. He growled quietly and turned away, unsure what to make of her. Kor called a meeting in the central chamber. The creatures gathered, their forms shifting and glowing in strange ways. Kor's scaled form towered above the council. "The trial of fear was only the beginning," he said. "Mira will now face the test of courage. We will see if her spirit can stand against true darkness." The creatures murmured. The test of courage was not simple. It was designed to confront the heart and mind with the worst possibilities. Many had entered and lost themselves entirely. Mira stepped forward calmly. "I am ready," she said. Kor studied her. "You will be placed in a place of illusions. They will show you death, loss, and betrayal. Only by trusting yourself will you survive." She nodded. "I will." The creatures led her to a massive chamber beneath the fortress. It was circular, and the ceiling disappeared into darkness. The floor was covered with a thick fog that seemed alive. When Mira stepped in, the shadows wrapped around her, whispering in voices that sounded like her own. "You cannot do this," a voice said. "You will fail." "I will not fail," Mira replied, steadying her breath. The shadows shifted, taking the form of her family, friends, and companions she had lost on previous missions. Their faces were twisted in pain and fear. They called to her, begging her to leave, to surrender. To give up, Mira closed her eyes and thought of her training. Of every lesson she had learned on Earth, she remembered her father telling her, "Fear is not your enemy. It is your guide." She opened her eyes and faced the illusions. "I cannot stop you from existing. But you will not control me." The shadows screamed and shattered into fragments of smoke. The floor beneath her trembled, and new illusions appeared. This time, they were creatures of nightmare, each one larger and more terrifying than the last. Wings of shadow flapped above her, claws of fire reached down, and eyes glowed with hatred. Mira did not move back. She walked forward, her steps measured and calm. She touched a claw that burned with fire. "You cannot harm me," she said. The fire sizzled against her suit, but did not burn. She reached a shadowy hand and held it. "You are fear, but I am choice. I choose to stand." The creatures watched from above, amazed. None of the nightmares had ever seen a being face their own worst selves and continue forward. Many had fallen into despair long before they could react. Suddenly, the illusions changed again. This time, she saw herself failing her missions, seeing her people die because of her mistakes. She heard whispers accusing her of weakness and cowardice. The world around her seemed to collapse into darkness. Mira took a deep breath. "I cannot control everything," she said. "I can only control how I respond. That is enough." The darkness began to recede. The illusions of death, loss, and betrayal faded into nothingness. Mira remained standing, her heart racing but her spirit unbroken. Kor entered the chamber, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He had watched from above and below, seeing every moment of the trial. He was impressed. No human had ever endured so much without screaming or surrendering. "You have passed the test of courage," he said. "Few beings can face themselves in this way. You are stronger than I imagined." Mira nodded, her breathing steadying. Strength comes from understanding fear, not avoiding it. Thren stepped forward, flames dimming. How is it possible that she stands while we, the creatures of Nightmare, thrive in fear? Veshra, the Shadow Queen, moved silently beside him. Perhaps humans are not prey, as we believed. Perhaps they are something we cannot comprehend. Mira looked around at the creatures of Nightmare. They were watching her with caution and awe. "I do not wish to fight you," she said, "but I will if it is necessary. That is how humans survive. We face what others flee from and continue moving forward." The creatures whispered among themselves. Some felt fear for the first time at the presence of a human. Some wondered if they could ever overcome the strength she had shown. Kor studied her closely. "You are unlike any being I have seen. You stand without strength of claws or fire. You face fear without fleeing. That is what makes you dangerous." Mira smiled faintly. "Dangerous only if you allow fear to control you." For hours, they remained in the chamber. Kor and the council discussed her future. Some wanted her gone, fearing what her courage would inspire. Others wanted to learn from her. In the end, Kor made a decision. "You will stay in this fortress," he said. "Not as a prisoner, but as a witness. You will learn our ways, and we will learn yours. Only then will we know if your people are friend or foe." Mira nodded. "I will do as you ask. But I will not hide from fear or danger. That is the human way." As night fell over Varkas, the fortress glowed with the last light of the sun. The creatures of Nightmare gathered in the halls, talking quietly about what they had seen. Mira walked among them, calm and steady. She treated even the smallest creatures with kindness, speaking softly, learning their ways. Some of the nightmares began to change. The Fire Lord Thren watched her for long hours, trying to understand why a human could face so much and not break. The Shadow Queen whispered to others in the shadows, noting that fear was not absolute. Even the largest and strongest creatures had limitations, and humans seemed to know them without needing to test them physically. Kor stood on the highest tower. Looking at Mira, he thought of the stories he had heard about humans traveling between stars, building colonies on dead worlds, facing dangers that would kill most species, and continuing to thrive. Now he understood why those stories had reached his ears. Humans were not the weakest. They were something entirely different. The wind blew across the plains, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke and ash. Mira breathed it in, unafraid. She had faced illusions of death, betrayal, and despair, yet she had remained standing. That alone earned her a place among creatures that thrived on fear. But even as she rested, the Fire Lord Thren whispered to the Shadow Queen, "This human's courage is a threat to everything we know. If we are to survive, we must find her limits. Every creature has them, even humans." The Shadow Queen nodded, moving silently through the hall. "Let us see if she is truly human, or something beyond our understanding." Kor, standing above them all, did not know what to make of it. He had spent centuries leading armies through darkness, guiding creatures of Nightmare to conquer worlds. Yet here was a human who had faced trials meant to break even the strongest. And she had stood without faltering. He realized that fear, which had always been a tool for control, was not enough to sway her. Perhaps humans had discovered a way to use fear differently, not to paralyze themselves, but to understand and move beyond it. As the night deepened, Mira looked up at the stars. For the first time, she felt the weight of what she had achieved. She had faced monsters that thrived in darkness, and yet she had not turned away. She had not fled. She had accepted fear and continued forward in the heart of the fortress. The creatures of Nightmare whispered among themselves. Some were afraid, some inspired, and some confused. None had ever seen a being like Mira, and none could deny that humanity was unlike anything they had known before. Kor finally turned away from the stars and spoke softly. "If all humans are like her, then we have underestimated the universe. Perhaps it is time to learn, not conquer. Mira, unaware of his thoughts, closed her eyes and rested. She had survived the test of courage, but she knew this was only the beginning. Outside the fortress, the winds howled and the deserts shifted. The creatures of Nightmare would watch, learn, and perhaps challenge her again. But for now, one human had stood where no one else could. And that was enough to change the balance of fear and courage on Verkus. The nights of Verkus were long and filled with red light from the molten rivers that flowed across the land. The air shimmered with heat, and the sky was painted with distant lightning. Mira stood on one of the high terraces of the fortress, looking at the horizon. The world still seemed like a living nightmare, yet she no longer felt trapped. The darkness around her was heavy, but inside her heart there was calm. Kor stood beside her, silent for a moment. His large frame cast a long shadow across the stone floor. "You have walked through fear and faced illusions that destroy even my warriors," he said. "But the hardest test is not in facing fear. It is in standing when others lose their way." Mira looked up at him. "I believe that too. The hardest thing is not surviving. It is keeping your heart from turning cold." Kor turned his gaze toward the fire plains. "You speak as if you understand war." "I've seen it," she said. "War does not just break bodies. It breaks hope. That is what humans fight hardest to protect." Their words carried across the wind. Neither noticed that Thren, the Fire Lord, was watching from the lower hall. His eyes burned brighter with anger. He hated how Kor spoke to the human with respect. He had seen fear in many forms, but never had he seen it bend before courage. To him, this human was not a lesson. She was a danger. Later that night, Thren called a meeting in secret. The Shadow Queen Veshra appeared beside him, her form flickering like smoke. "You still burn with jealousy," she whispered. "This human is changing Kor," Thren said. "He was a leader of monsters. Now he speaks of peace. He listens to her as if she were one of us. Soon he will forget who he is." Veshra's voice was soft but sharp. "Then what do you suggest?" "We test her again," Thren growled. "This time not in illusion or courage. This time in truth. We will show her that the heart of Verkus cannot be tamed." The Shadow Queen tilted her head. "You mean to unleash the rogue?" Thren nodded. "Yes. Let the human face the fire beast. If she survives, then maybe she is what Kor believes. If she dies, the balance of our world remains." By dawn, their plan was set. The rogue they spoke of was an ancient creature that lived deep beneath the fortress. It was born of molten stone and rage, trapped long ago after destroying cities and turning rivers into flame. Even Kor avoided disturbing it. The next morning, the sky turned red as the creature awoke. The ground trembled, and heat waves rolled across the fortress walls. Mira was walking through the main hall when the floor shook beneath her feet. The walls cracked and fire burst from the ground. Kor rushed in, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Stay back. Something is coming." Before she could ask, a massive roar filled the air. The molten floor split open, and a creature made of fire and stone climbed out. Its eyes glowed brighter than the sun, and its body dripped with lava. The air around it burned, melting the metal pillars. Thren shouted from the upper balcony, pretending to be surprised. "The rogue has broken free. It will destroy everything." Kor knew this was no accident, but there was no time to question. The fire beast raised its arms and slammed them into the ground, sending waves of molten rock toward them. Mira dived aside, her suit protecting her from the heat but not from the shock. Kor leaped in front of her, his claws cutting through the fire. He swung his tail, striking the creature's chest, but it barely moved. Its roar shook the walls. Mira stood up, coughing from the smoke. "We cannot fight it head-on," she shouted. Kor turned to her. "Then what do we do?" She looked around quickly. The molten rivers below the fortress connected to vents that released pressure during storms. "If we open those vents, the lava will drain and weaken it," she said. Kor nodded. "Can you reach them?" "Yes," she said. "But I will need time." Kor faced the beast again. "Then I will give you that time." He charged at the creature, claws glowing as they met molten skin. The impact sent fire flying through the air. The fortress shook with every hit. Mira ran toward the lower levels, following the path she had seen in the maps the night before. The heat grew stronger the deeper she went, but she kept moving. At the same time, the other creatures gathered on the walls, watching in silence. Some wanted to help, but Thren stopped them. "Let her fight her own battle," he said, hiding the satisfaction in his voice. Mira reached the control chamber. The old machinery was covered in ash and heat damage. She used her tools to open the first valve, releasing a blast of steam. The floor rumbled as lava drained away from one of the main vents. The fire beast roared louder, its power beginning to weaken. But it was not enough. Mira had to open 2 more valves. She ran to the next one, but the metal handle was fused. She grabbed a metal rod from the floor and used all her strength to pry it open. The pressure burst, burning her gloves, but she did not stop. Kor, fighting above, could see the lava starting to sink. The beast's body began to crack, its glow dimming slightly. He shouted down, "One more, Mira." She nodded and ran to the final valve. The ground was breaking apart, and flames licked her boots. She reached the lever, but the control was buried under molten stone. She grabbed a fallen pipe, using it as a lever to push the blockage aside. The fire beast turned its head toward her. It sensed what she was doing. It let out a terrible roar and swung one massive arm toward the chamber. The heat wave rushed through the air like a storm. Kor saw it coming. He leaped across the hall, shielding Mira with his massive body. The fire hit them both. Kor's scales glowed red, but he stood firm. "Finish it," he said. Mira forced the valve open with one last push. The ground shook violently as lava rushed out of the main chambers. The beast screamed in rage as the heat drained from its body. Its glowing eyes dimmed, and cracks spread through its form. In seconds, the creature collapsed into molten dust. Silence filled the fortress. The fire rivers cooled slowly into black stone. Mira sat on the floor, exhausted, her gloves burned and suit covered in ash. Kor stood beside her, breathing heavily. "You did it," she said, looking up at him. "No," he said. "We did it." From the upper balcony, Thren watched in disbelief. He had expected her to fail, but instead, she had saved the fortress. The creatures began to cheer, their voices echoing through the halls. Even the shadows flickered brighter. As if the fortress itself approved, Kor turned to Mira. "You fought beside me like a warrior. You are no longer a guest here. You are part of this place now." Mira smiled faintly. "I only did what I could. Humans always fight hardest when they have something to protect." Later, when the fortress had settled, Kor confronted Thren and Veshra in private. "You released the rogue," he said. "Do not deny it." Thren's fire dimmed. "We did it to prove that she could not survive." Kor's eyes glowed bright gold. "And yet she did. If you had succeeded, we would all be ash. You risked everything because of fear." Thren lowered his head. "She changes everything. The old ways will not survive if she stays." "Then perhaps they should not," Kor said. He turned and left them in silence. For the first time, even Thren felt a coldness that fire could not warm. That night, Mira stood again on the terrace. The stars were clearer now, and the air was still. Kor joined her once more. "You fought with great courage," he said. Mira shook her head. "I was afraid the entire time." "That is what makes it courage," Kor replied. To act while afraid, they stood quietly for a while. The fortress that had once been a place of horror now seemed almost peaceful. The creatures were changing. Some no longer hid in the dark. Some even tried to speak with Mira. The walls of fear were beginning to crack. Mira looked at Kor. "Your people are strong, but they could be more than nightmares. You could be protectors." Kor thought about it. "Protectors of what?" "Of life," she said. "Of balance. You understand fear better than anyone. You could teach others how to live with it instead of being ruled by it." Kor said nothing at first. Then he nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time to build something new." Far away, Thren watched them from the shadows. His fire flickered weakly, his pride wounded but not broken. He whispered to himself, If humans can turn monsters into protectors, then nothing will stop them. Nothing at all. But even in his bitterness, he felt a strange respect for Mira. She had done what no one had ever done before. She had changed the heart of fear itself. As the last fires of the rogue beast faded and the fortress settled into quiet peace, Mira finally allowed herself to rest. Her body was weary, but her spirit was light. She knew that this was only part of the journey. The humans had come seeking understanding, and now, for the first time, the nightmares of Varkas began to understand humanity. The first light of Varkas' sun crept over the horizon, cutting through the thick smoke that had long hung over the planet. For the first time in centuries, the world seemed quieter. The rivers of lava cooled slightly, and the black desert shimmered with a strange golden hue. Mira stood at the top of the fortress, looking down at the creatures below. Many of them were no longer hiding in the shadows. Some walked openly through the halls, their eyes watching her not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Cord joined her silently. His massive shadow stretched over the terrace, yet his presence was calm. "You have changed more than just our walls," he said. The creatures no longer see fear as their only tool. Some now seek understanding. Mira smiled faintly. "It is not just I who changed them. Fear does not disappear. It just changes when someone stands against it." Kor turned his eyes toward the distant mountains, where smoke still rose from cracks in the earth. And yet there are still those who resist. Thren burns with pride and jealousy. Veshra still watches from the shadows. "They will learn," Mira said firmly. "Change takes time. But the first step is always the hardest." In the grand chamber of the fortress, the creatures gathered. Kor addressed them, his voice carrying through the massive hall. "We have seen a being that walks among fear without bending. A human, small in size, yet vast in courage. We have watched her face illusions, fire, and death, and she has remained unbroken. What she shows us is not weakness. It is strength," some creatures murmured. Many still struggled to accept this. The Fire Lord Thren stepped forward, flames flickering as he spoke. "She is not like any being we have faced, yet she is still human. How can something so small change us?" Mira spoke softly from the terrace above them. "It is not size that matters. It is the heart. The choice to stand, even when fear is strong, is what makes us who we are." The creatures grew silent. Even the strongest warriors of Nightmare felt the weight of her words. Kor continued, "If we are to survive in this galaxy, we cannot rely only on fear. We must understand strength in other forms. Courage, compassion, patience. These are weapons that do not burn, but they last." Veshra's shadows flickered as she whispered to herself. Perhaps she is right. Perhaps the old ways are not enough. The day grew hotter as Mira walked among the creatures. She spoke with the smallest shadow beasts, learning their language of whispers. She touched the molten rock rivers and listened to their hum. She walked through the fortress halls, observing the ways the monsters trained and hunted. She did not judge. She only understood. Even the rogue beast that had been defeated in the fire trial remained in the minds of the creatures. They realized that strength alone could not always save them. Mira had shown that courage, quick thinking, and understanding fear could achieve what brute force never could. Kor watched her with interest. "You do more than survive," he said quietly. "You teach without speaking orders. That is something we have never known." Mira smiled faintly. "Teaching is not about power. It is about showing what is possible. Fear does not have to control you. It can guide you if you listen carefully." As the sun reached its highest point, a new challenge arose. From beyond the mountains, distant roars and echoes of metal sounded. A group of humans had arrived in small ships, drawn by the same curiosity that had brought Mira. They had come to see the creatures of Varkas, to make contact. The Nightmare Council grew tense. Many of them feared that the arrival of more humans would bring war. Thren's flames flared higher, and Veshra's shadows deepened. Yet Kor did not move to attack. Mira stepped forward. "They come as we do," she said, "to understand, to speak, not to conquer." The first human ship, landed near the fortress. The hatch opened, and a small group stepped out. Their faces were calm, eyes bright with curiosity and courage. The creatures of Nightmare watched, unsure of what to do. Some whispered in fear, others in awe. Kor turned to Mira. "You brought them here. Are you certain they will not fight us?" "They will follow my example," she said. "We show respect. We speak with honesty. That is all humans ask for." The human group approached slowly. Mira greeted them and then turned to the creatures. "These are my people. They do not wish to harm you. We only wish to learn from you, as you have learned from me." A silence fell over the fortress. The creatures had never seen this before. Predators and hunters had always expected submission or battle, yet here was a human standing among them, not asking for surrender, not demanding respect, only offering understanding. The Fire Lord Thryn stepped forward, flames dimming. "If they mean no harm, then why are they here?" Mira looked directly at him. "Because knowledge is stronger than fear. Humans do not take worlds to rule them. We take lessons and experiences to share them. You may keep your lands. You may keep your strength. We do not seek to diminish it." Kor nodded slowly. "It is true. The humans who arrive are not conquerors. They are learners. They face fear as we face fire and shadow." Veshra's shadows moved among the council. "Perhaps there's more to this than I understood. Perhaps humans are not just prey. Perhaps they are something to be respected." The human group began to speak with the creatures. They asked questions, listened carefully, and shared stories of their worlds. They spoke of oceans, forests, and cities built not just with stone and metal, but with hope and courage. The creatures listened. Some laughed, some cried, and some felt a warmth they had never known. Even Thryn began to see it. His fire softened, and for the first time, he laughed out in anger, but in amazement. They are small, yet they carry light inside them. The day passed, and the sun began to set. Mira stood at the top of the fortress once more. Kor joined her, looking at the creatures below, who were speaking with the humans. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have changed the way we see ourselves." "I only stood," Mira replied. "I did not change anything. They chose to see the world differently because they wanted to. Humans only show the way." The night came, and the stars shone brighter than ever. The creatures of Nightmare no longer hid in fear of each other. They had learned to see courage and understanding in a human. They had begun to question the old ways and to imagine a world where fear did not control every action. Kor looked down at the halls and the creatures speaking with humans. "You have taught more than I could have imagined. You have made monsters see what it means to live with courage, to protect without destruction, and to respect without fear." Myra smiled faintly. "It is the human way. We all have monsters, both inside and outside. The difference is that we do not let them rule us. We stand with them, and in doing so, we grow stronger." The Fire Lord Thryn, standing nearby, finally spoke aloud. "Perhaps fear is not the only measure of power. Perhaps strength lies in standing for something more than oneself." Veshra's shadows flickered and moved over the walls. "Then humans are not to be feared but understood. Their courage can teach even the strongest of nightmares." Kor looked at Mira and said softly, "You have shown us that standing with monsters does not make one weak. It can make one stronger. You have changed Varkus more than fire, shadow, or claws ever could." Mira nodded. "I only stood. They chose to learn." From that night on, the Fortress of Nightmares became something new. The creatures began to speak openly with humans. They shared their knowledge of fear, power, and survival. Humans shared their courage, understanding, and hope. Slowly, Varkus began to feel alive in a way it never had before. Even Thryn, once jealous and bitter, began to respect the humans. He realized that strength was not only measured in fire or battle, but also in courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand when all seems lost. Kor watched over it all, thinking of the universe beyond Varkus. He realized that humans were indeed different. They faced fear, loss, and danger with a spirit that could not be broken. And in doing so, they taught even the creatures of nightmare something no battle could ever show. Myra stood quietly under the stars. She knew this was only the beginning. Humans would continue to explore, to learn, and to teach. Yet she also knew that even in this world of nightmares, hope could exist, and courage could grow. The creatures of Varkas no longer saw humans as prey. They saw them as equals, beings who could face fear and turn it into strength. The nightmare creatures learned that even the smallest, weakest-seeming beings could carry a fire stronger than any monster. Kor looked at Mira and said, "You stand with creatures of nightmare, yet none are like you. Your people have shown us the power of courage, and perhaps one day the galaxy will see what I see now." Mira smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Every being has a choice. Humans chose to stand. You chose to see. That is all it takes to change the world. For the first time in centuries, Varkas felt peace. The fires cooled, the shadows softened, and a new understanding took root. The creatures of nightmare had learned a lesson they could never forget. Humanity was not the strongest by claws or fire. Humanity was the strongest by courage, by spirit, and by the willingness to stand even when all seemed lost. And in that lesson, the nightmares discovered something extraordinary. They had found a reason to hope and a reason to change.